Welcome to chapter 15 of Positivity Bias. And I wanted to start off with a story that's not in here today, but a different story. As you know, I'm on a military chat with over 150 active duty service members. And this morning there was a post that read like this. I went to the DFAC, which is a dining facility for those who have other terms for it. Went to the dining facility for breakfast, and I watched them use the spatula to stir the other guy's ham and bacon, then barely scrape it off, and then use it on my eggs. And then there's this green puke sign, I'm an emoji, and it says, decided to just go for some cereal. Then the next comment was, someone else said, yep, same. I made her do it again, but with a different equipment. She gave me the dirtiest look.
Well, non-Jewish people don't understand. They don't get it.
So what came from that was another chat, because I broke in and said, someone else had commented, if you ask them nicely, it's be fine. She said, well, no, they don't. So one of the things I talked about was most people want to be helpful and they want to be supportive if they feel they're being supported. If if you treat them with respect and you treat them with kindness, then they'll feel so. And that doesn't come quickly. It's a longer process. It's a series of good morning, how are you? Good to see you. Nice little chats along the way that develop a rapport that lets that person know, I appreciate you. I know you up and early and you're out here in the chow hall and you're slopping grits and everything. I get that. But hi, nice to see you. And if you do that over time, you develop that rapport, that relationship. Most people want to be kind and be helpful. That's the default. But life tends to get in the way. And so that was a chat from this morning. And I think it speaks to our topic here about illumination, not elimination. Don't write the guys off because they had a bad day. Bring some light into their life and things like that. I think that's really, what that story spoke to me about this morning, on the chat was.
I got a mess hall story too.
Go for it.
No. This goes back 40 years ago. Well, look, when I was a young lieutenant at the MP school, and I'm going through that dining facility line, and I'm waiting to get my eggs, I noticed there's a cockroach on the steam table. So I said to the cook, there's a cockroach there. And this is at Fort McClellan, Alabama. There were cockroaches everywhere. But he takes the ladle out of the cream chip beef and goes wham, right? And he smashes that cockroach with the ladle and sticks it back in the cream chip beef. Now, when he did that and he hits the cockroach on the steam table with the ladle, he got cream chip beef all over me and my fatigues. And then the next three people too. And he goes, I got 3 days left in the Army, Lieutenant. What are you going to do about it? I go, well, I'll tell you this. I'm not going to have the cream chip beef.
Oh, goodness.
I look back at it, and it was pretty funny because I'm wiping that cream chip beef off of me. I don't like cream chip beef anyway, even though I've never been, that really is right there with thou shalt not boil a calf in its mother's milk, that cream chip beef. That's why that really always, I thought about that even back then. Oh, God. See what I remember? See what I remember with your story with the bacon? Yeah, bacon grease. Yeah.
My version of that would be that every dog has to piss off its territory, and that's his territory. I mean, I remember being in the cafeteria line and reaching for the bigger piece of cake that was 2 or 3 back, and getting yelled at, by the person behind the counter. because
Yeah, I mean,
that's their territory, you know.
were you in uniform
This is not in the military. This is in the hospital.
in the hospital? Well, this is in the military, and I'm a second lieutenant. Granted, a second lieutenant is lower than the whale shit that lies at the bottom of the ocean. But I mean, he was a specialist, and technically, I outrank him by far. So, but I said to myself, he's got 3 days left in the service. Let's let it go and just make the most of it. And I said, I'm not going to have that cream chip beef though. I'll go for the eggs. It went
With
right
the same
past.
ladle?
What's that?
With the same ladle?
Oh no! I went
Okay,
to
just
making
checking. Okay.
omelets. I bypassed his station totally.
It's interesting because, and again, we're back to the topic we started off, doing acts of goodness and kindness in the initial part to build up rapport. So I just spoke with a gentleman, Daniel is his name, and he just finished a 7-month deployment in the Pacific Ocean on the USS Theodore Roosevelt, and was able to keep Shabbos, keep kosher, keep his beard, put on tefillin, 7 months at sea. But they didn't have his kosher MREs. They arrived at port the day after he left, right? So he lived on basically beans and vegetables for the whole deployment, and definitely malnourished. But the guys in the galley, they saw his commitment. They saw he wasn't asking for anything different. He wasn't asking, just this is what I can have, and that's what he took. That's it. But because he was kind and because he was nice, they wanted to do something. They wanted to help. They found ways to help. Making cleaning out the oven and making a special Shabbos challahs for him every week, getting him permission to use the officer's galley before Passover so he could, kosher up some of the pots and pans and make stuff. They went out of their way to find a way to support him because he wasn't asking for anything from them, anything big, and they saw his dedication. He was polite. He was kind and polite at every move. And so they now wanted to help him. So I think that's the point of the ongoing acts of goodness and kindness, the ongoing politeness, being a mensch at all times to everyone. And if we do that, then we earn the respect, and then people want to help. I think that's where I'm coming from, is that idea of it takes time, it takes investment, but that's where the fruit comes from.
I agree.
Also, I look at that also for Pirkei Avot. Ezeu Chacham Halamed Mikol Adam. So who is wise is somebody who can learn something from everyone. So everyone that you speak to or with, you can learn something from them or about them, and that makes you wiser because you learn from their experiences.
So in our story here, it begins with, a story about someone who was having a crisis of faith from a loss of a family member, loves the rituals, but, was trying to say it's not, Judaism is more of a burden. And the Rebbe asked him one thing, if he and his wife would light Shabbos candles every Friday night. Just one thing. And they said yes, and they did that. But we say that every mitzvah brings a chain of other mitzvahs in its wake. And the same thing is that they saw the benefits and the good part of that, and it was so beneficial that it blossomed into Friday nights with the family and cherished time with the family and hosting others, and it just went into one thing after another. And if you ask the gentleman to from the beginning, he said he acknowledges that the Rebbe found a way to bring them on board in a way that they could cherish and see the benefits.
I really related to this because when my wife and I got married, and we were these were not our first marriages, but we wanted to have an increased presence of Judaism in our lives. And one of the things we did was we decided we're going to do the Shabbat candles. And then we added on the challah and then the wine. We don't do the Shabbat dinner, but and we have grandkids join us, and it's always nice to start Shabbat like that.
Beautiful. Yep,
Or as
that-
Confucius said, a journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. So you take that first step, and as you said, Rabbi, that brings another mitzvah or another step, however you want to look at it, and so on and so on. I've had, I've spoken with people and I asked them, why don't you, would you consider doing this? Would you consider, and they try to group everything together. Well, I'm not going to put on tefillin until I'm Shomer Shabbos. But each mitzvah, each thing is independent from the other.
Yeah. I tried to fill in here and there. I think I'm going to buy myself a better set. Mine came to me used, but it's doesn't quite fit like I'd like it to, and it's the little itty bitty ones from the Israeli army.
Well, the summer campaign is coming up, so now's a good time to speak to.
Oh yeah, I got to see my buddy Rabbi Wolf. He was trying to sell me on that a few years ago.
Yep, time to do that one. But I think that's the beauty of what this idea of the positivity is finding something positive, one positive thing, and adding that on, and then it kind of grows with it.
And
I
to
think
part of this chapter too. Think about it.
again.
To fill in part of the chapter too.
Yep, absolutely. Yes, that was a story about Jacques Lipschitz, the artist. And the Rebbe just asked him to put on tefillin, and then of course, again, one thing leads to another, and
yeah,
but he feels that time with tefillin every morning to him is now so precious that he doesn't think he could get through the day without it. It's become a very important part of his life. But it's this next story that I think tickles me, because here was a guy. I'll just kind of read parts of the story though here. So Zohaim Cohen, he was a successful Israeli judge, and eventually was appointed to the Israeli Supreme Court. Very secular at that time, and used his position to push secularized agenda and deals and things like that. And it came to the point where he was the one who signed into law the proposal that one did not need to be halachically Jewish in order to qualify for the law of return, which grants any Jew from around the world automatic citizenship. So someone could go through a conversion, a crackerjack conversion, and still then have all the automatic citizenship in Israel. And so this caused the Rebbe a lot of grief, and it was one of those few things that the Rebbe took a hard line on and really pushed back on. But then in 1975, this Chaim Cohen, he shows up at 770 Lubavitch World Headquarters on Simchas Torah, and he shows up. And of course, kind of a shock of everybody there, that kind of a chutzpah of a guy who's been so destructive to Orthodox Judaism, to walk into the shul.
Yeah, and then they give him an honor, and that was questioned. But that was interesting. All this coming about like this anyway.
Yeah, so the Rebbe gives him a bracha for Ata Resa that he says, and he gives him the opportunity to hold a Torah during the Hakafas, and then he cheers on the crowd for the singing and dancing and carrying on. And the people inside 770 were like, what? How do you give someone like that these honors? And the Rebbe is very simple. A Jew comes to shul, who wants to celebrate, we have him celebrate. It's really simple. That is, just add light. Wants to do a mitzvah, that's it. Have him do a mitzvah. And the love and acceptance that came with that, in many ways, turned the guy around.
Did they go out onto the street and dance there?
Oh, we always do that.
And I bet they have a lot of tourists at this the Lubavitch Shul in
Absolutely. The Crown Heights Police Department shuts down the couple of blocks.
Yeah, I was trying to picture this in my mind.
Yeah. Well, but the idea that the idea of the dancing in the street part is the idea of don't keep the joy internal. bring it out, share it out, bring the dancing to the streets and light up the streets, bring the joy to the streets and light up the streets, and bring it to the outside. You know, part of our responsibility as a light unto the world is to bring the joy of God and service of God, to bring that out into the opens and out into the streets and literally. So that is part and parcel of Simchas Torah. Here in Chicago, I remember years ago being a part of the Beis Menachem synagogue on Howard Street, and every year Simchas Torah. So one year there was a couple that lived 2 blocks from the synagogue, and there had come a time when she was no longer able to get out of the house. She was wheelchair bound and couldn't get out of the house. And the rabbi got everybody up and dancing, took the Torahs to them, and literally danced on her front yard so that she could sit in the window and be part of the celebration, right? And then down the street, a few blocks down the street, was a Sephardic synagogue. And so we'd literally, the whole parade dancing with the Torahs would go down the street and go into the Sephardic synagogue and be dancing in the Sephardic synagogue. They did that for a couple of years, and then the Sephardic synagogue loved it so much, they said, you know what? We got to take turns, though. This year, we're coming to you.
Yeah, I know which synagogue you're talking about. That's the one over by California there, right?
Yep, yep.
Where's the
so-
other synagogue at?
Beis Menachem on Howard.
I have to look for that. I know where the Beit Din is.
So it's become a mutual thing, sharing the celebration and dancing the street together and doing that with the other synagogue. It's become an annual thing on Simchas Torah. So it's really a beautiful place. But this idea of lighting up, you know, the darkness, lighting up the streets and everything. This next story is really a powerful story.
Which one? The Lighthouse one?
Lighthouse shows the way. Yep. When a Jewish executive who ran the South African advertisement agency, accepting the African National Congress as a client to help them project a better image. And walking into their office, he sees a poster of Yasser Arafat from the PLO and everything. And right there, and she was so distressed. He wrote to the Ebb about how do I even consider participating in this? And the Rebbe's response is, no, opposite. How much more so you have to be there? You've got to be the one to bring some light into the dark situation. You need to be able to have a positive influence to them on good. And how much more so you have to be there. You know, so it's the idea of absolutely going into dark places and bringing in the light. You know, that's part of the job, right? Get in there and shed some light. And then this other story here about
Jesse Helms,
yeah,
Dershowitz, yeah.
you know, but the idea here is the Rebbe is speaking about especially politicians who often act out of expediency more than conviction, that we should engage them in a positive way and try to be a good influence, a positive influence, and give them an opportunity to do something positive, you know, and particularly in a case of here, we're learning how to communicate with people of different backgrounds, different cultures, in a way that, again, lets the light in.
I wish I would know. I wish it had expounded on this story a little bit, and what did they tell Jesse Helms that changed him? But it's very general.
Yeah, it's very general. I think it, you know, also protects some of the privacy and things as well, going into some of those details. But again, time after time, you know, I love the quote here on page 204, where years ago, when Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, when he was the UN Council, when he was the Israelis ambassador to the UN back in 1984, and he had met with the Rebbe in Brooklyn, came to 770 on Simchas Torah, and the Rebbe's comment to him, "You are going to a house of lies." That's how he referred to the United Nations. You're going to a house of lies. Remember that in a hall of perfect darkness, if you light one small candle, its light will be seen from afar by everyone. Your mission is to light a candle for truth for the Jewish people. And so that was his mission to him when he went into the United Nations. You need to be a light. You literally need to be a light unto the nations.
You know, and it may have been an analogy, but it's so true from a military point of view, because in pure darkness, if you use a flashlight or light a match, it can be seen from miles away,
Yeah.
over a mile away. It's just amazing how far you can see a small light.
You know, I had an interview with an Army officer who was stationed, was Passover time, and he was stationed in Afghanistan on the border of Pakistan in a forward operating base that had dark night laws, where you couldn't even walk outside with your cell phone because that light would be seen, become a target, and there would be immediate repercussions.
Light and noise discipline, otherwise you get shot at. Yes.
So here it was Passover, and he made Passover alone on a rock, you know, with a three-legged stool in the darkness, just by moonlight. And he said it was very interesting because in one sense he felt horribly alone, but in another sense he felt totally united with Jews all over the world during the Passover Seder that night, because he was literally out under the stars and under the moon and feeling that connection in a different way. But that was the first time I'd heard about this dark night laws, you know, in forward operating bases. A little light dispels a lot of darkness. It can be seen for miles around. Yeah.
There's nothing like having a Passover during a war. Been there.
Yeah. I think that we close on this story from the Gemara, which is a very powerful story.
Oh, by the way, Simchat Torah is mentioned twice in this chapter.
Yes, it's a time of joy. Spread some light. Absolutely. So this story, I think it's a very, very telling story and an important story. The Talmud relates the story of Rabbi Meir and his brilliant wife, Bruria. There were certain outlaw men, lawless men, in Rabbi Meir's vicinity who used to cause him constant suffering. And he responded in praying that they should die. And on hearing this prayer, Bruria pointed out to her husband that undoubtedly his prayer was justified on the basis of the pasuk, "Let sins cease." Rabbi Bruria argued the verse does not say that the sinners should cease, that the sins should cease. So she argued using that pasuk, using the pasuk goes on to say, "And let the wicked be no more," meaning she was understanding the verse to say that there shouldn't be wicked men. Make the men righteous. Pray that the men should do teshuvah, that they should become righteous and stop their wicked ways. Then the sinning stops, the wickedness stops, and there are no more sinners. There's no more wickedness. And the story concludes in the Talmud that Meir acted on Bruria's advice, and the lawless men did in fact do tshuva and repent. So the Rebbe's point here is that yes, there are violent people, there are terrorists in the world. There's nothing that says that the only way to deal with them is through taking their lives. Even when we speak of the enemy and the avenger, our actions must be to stop the enemy and the avenger, to stop and to annul the fact that he's an enemy. Bring him on our side, turn him around. The language of the Talmud is the sinners should cease, not the sinners themselves, to the point that they become our friends and our advocates.
That didn't work in last week's Torah portion.
Yes, very interesting. Yes, Kairach and the rebellion, right? And Moshe made all the efforts to change that around, but when it couldn't, then it had to be eliminated.
He even waited till the next day. He said, Babokar, give them overnight to repent,
Yeah.
and they still didn't repent.
And so
Yeah.
one of the things we have to be aware of is certainly, taking the military stance. There are times when the enemy has to be eliminated, and that's it. They have to be eliminated. But even the Talmud talks about, giving them a chance to change their evil ways, giving them a chance to back up, giving them a chance to surrender and become consumed within the people and do the right thing. We give them the opportunity. If they don't take that opportunity, it is what it is.
Well,
The evil has to be eliminated.
I think to this, I work with prisoners of war. So, we obviously took thousands and thousands of prisoners. We gave them the opportunity to, how should I put this, be reunited with their homeland. And we didn't necessarily change their way of life, but, we allowed them to surrender. But there are people that we had Republican Guard with us, and I know that we didn't change their ways of thinking in any way. As a law enforcement officer, there are people that would kill you in a heartbeat. When I say a heartbeat, I mean you don't have the ability to pray for them or try and convince them that they could be a better person. It's just it's your life or theirs. That's
We
how
talked last week about you talked about the time, distance, and shielding as much as you can. But if it's gone,
right.
then you have to do what you have to do.
I mean, it's always worked for me. But by the same token, when I see that situation on TV where that kid is running with the gun, and there's an officer chasing him, and he spins around and he tossed the gun in the meantime. This is happening, and that happened in Chicago. Chicago police officer chasing a teenager at 2 o'clock in the morning, something like that, with a gun, and he's hot on his heels. The kid throws the gun against a fence, but the officer doesn't know that, and he spins around and raising his hands at the same time. The officer thinks the gun's coming up, so he shoots the kid. I mean, it's just a horrific situation because the officer reacted based on his fear that this kid was going to shoot him, and in reality, the kid just was trying to ditch the gun.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I would have to say I would have that's a perfect case for that time, distance, and shielding. Where had the officer had been a sole person like me, he would have been far behind the kid, and the kid would have surrendered, and there wouldn't have been a problem. But that's just because I'm old and slow, and I've been that way even before I retired. So
yeah. So time, distance, and shielding, if it works, and then it can be helpful. But there are times when the
sometimes being too quick is not a smart idea.
Right. But in our story here, we're talking about the idea of trying to use illumination rather than elimination. Sometimes it can't be done, understood, especially in the military context or police context. But whenever possible, trying to find the opportunities for illumination. I watched a video clip the other day of a police officer coming onto a situation where the neighbors had been complaining about noise, the racket of noise, and the cop came on site, and there was a bunch of teenagers out there playing basketball, making a lot of noise. Given the circumstance, he didn't stop the noise, he joined the game.
It's situational. I mean, there comes a point when people want to sleep, and it's in the most local codes when you have to not make noise like be on a basketball court. Parks close at 11 p.m. here in Chicago. There's a reason for that.
But I think that cop was listened to because he joined the game for 10, 15 minutes, and then he called the game to a halt, and they listened to him because he didn't come in there telling them off and saying bad things. He came in, he joined the game for 10, 15 minutes. And he said, by the way, guys, it's midnight. We really got to call it off. But hey, it's been a good game. I really appreciate the opportunity.
I mean, just because you get a complaint doesn't mean it's necessarily something you need to act on. I'm kind of curious in this chapter, this last closing chapter, or with these guys that were lawless. What changed them? Yeah, that doesn't. We talk about the sin should cease, but how the sins? How did these people find a different way of being not sinners? What convinced them?
I don't remember the whole story here, but I remember it began with his prayers for them to change their way, which changed his perception of them, which means he was able to reach out to them in a more friendly way. And then one mitzvah leads to another, and they change their around. But it began with him no longer praying for their death, but praying for their teshuvah, and then pursuing that avenue.
Maybe that, a different way of looking at them. Maybe he interacted with them differently.
Or the community decided to support them so that they didn't have to rob people. Who knows?
Yeah. Remember that story about Judge LaGuardia, who it was before he became, I think, the mayor of St. Louis, but at that time he was just the judge. And someone brought a woman to court because she had stolen bread. And she was guilty. So he pronounced her guilty, and he said that the fine would be, $3 or whatever it was for the bread and everything. And he said, but before you pay that, he said, I want to fine everyone in the courtroom 10 cents for living in a community where a grandmother should have to go steal bread to provide for her grandchildren. And I want you to pay up right now. Bailiff, go collect it. And he literally went around and he collected 10 cents from everybody in the room, handed it to the bubby, to the grandmother, and then she paid the baker, and they all went home.
That's
Judge LaGuardia. So, yes, it's finding a way to illuminate the environment, and hopefully make some changes that way. Any thoughts closing up?
Well, the last story reminds me of a joke.
Go for it.
So this woman steals a can of potatoes, and she gets hauled into court for that. And the judge says to her, ma'am, I'm sorry you got put in this position, but tell me how many potatoes were in that can. She says 9. So the judge says, okay, I'm going to sentence you to 9 days in jail, one day for each potato that you stole. And her husband says, Your Honor, I have something I need to say. She also stole a can of peas.
That is funny.
Anyway, sorry.
All right, now I have to tell a joke. Now. So there was a court case that was brought to the Rav of the town. There was a family that couldn't afford food, and the kids were standing outside the bakery, just sniffing the bread, just inhaling the aroma from the bakery. That's all they could afford. But they didn't have any money to buy, so they were just. The baker comes and he demands payment for the benefit, the benefit that they're getting from his bakery, and it goes to the bezdin. And so the rabbi hears the case, and he turns to he turns to the baker. He says, "How much do you think that's worth?" And he says, 30 cents. So he turns to the family. He says, "Give me 30 cents." And they give him 30 pennies. And he takes the pennies and he jingles it to the baker. You hear it? That's your hana. And he hands it back to the family. They got to smell the baker, you get to hear the jingling.
Yeah.
Have a fantastic week, and we'll see you next week.
Okay, you
Okay,
too,
God bless.
guys.
bye-bye.
Be good.